The morning of June 21st, 1995, began like any other in the bustling port of Galveston, Texas. The sky was overcast, thick with gray clouds that seemed to press down on the Gulf of Mexico, and the salty breeze carried a sticky warmth that clung to everything it touched. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation as thousands of passengers prepared for what they believed would be the vacation of a lifetime. Docked at Terminal 2, the SS Meridian towered above the port like a floating palace. This 12-deck luxury cruise liner was preparing to depart for a 2-week Caribbean voyage that would take passengers through some of the most breathtaking waters in the world. The ship's white hull gleamed despite the overcast sky, and its multiple decks promised endless entertainment, fine dining, and unforgettable memories. Among the 2,100 excited passengers boarding that morning were two newlyweds whose love story seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Liam and Clare Monroe walked hand in hand up the gangway, their faces glowing with the kind of happiness that only comes from finding your perfect match. Fresh off their wedding in Colorado Springs just 4 days earlier, they moved with the easy confidence of two people completely in sync with each other. 26-year-old Liam Monroe was a civil engineer whose methodical mind and gentle nature had first attracted Clare during their college years at the University of Colorado. Standing 6 feet tall with sandy brown hair and kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he had the steady presence of someone you could depend on through any storm. His colleagues described him as brilliant but humble, the kind of man who would spend hours perfecting a bridge design to ensure it would last for generations. 25-year-old Clare Monroe, née Williams, was everything Liam wasn't, and that's exactly what made them perfect together. A sculptor by trade with an artist's soul, she was bubbly, creative, and saw beauty in places others overlooked. Her auburn hair caught the light as she laughed, and her green eyes sparkled with an infectious enthusiasm for life. Friends often said that being around Clare was like being touched by sunshine. She had a gift for making ordinary moments feel magical. The couple shared a deep love for travel, spending hours poring over maps and planning adventures to far-off places. They were both avid journalers, documenting their experiences in detailed notebooks that they hoped to share with their future children. Their apartment in Denver was filled with souvenirs from weekend trips, concert tickets from 90s indie music shows, and photographs from hiking expeditions in the Rocky Mountains. Their cabin, B742, was a balcony suite with a full ocean view that Clare had specifically requested. "I want to wake up to the sound of waves every morning," she had told Liam when they were planning the trip. "I want to fall asleep to the rhythm of the sea." The cabin was modest but comfortable, with 2 twin beds that could be pushed together, a small sitting area, and sliding glass doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the endless expanse of ocean. Their luggage told the story of a couple who had planned every detail of their honeymoon with care and excitement. Beach gear was neatly packed alongside Clare's leather-bound sketch pad, where she planned to capture the Caribbean landscapes in charcoal and watercolor. Liam's prized Nikon film camera was carefully wrapped in protective cloth. He was an amateur photographer who believed that the best memories deserved to be preserved on actual film, not just digital files. Most importantly, they had brought a small Sony Handycam camcorder, a wedding gift from Clare's parents. Clare had promised to document every single day of their honeymoon, creating a video diary that they could watch on future anniversaries. "Someday we'll be old and gray," she had said, holding the camera up to record Liam's laughing face, "and we'll want to remember exactly how happy we were on our first adventure as husband and wife." As the SS Meridian pulled away from the dock at 4:30 p.m., Liam and Clare stood on their balcony, watching the Texas coastline slowly disappear into the distance. The ship's horn blasted 3 times, signaling the official start of their Caribbean adventure. Other passengers waved from nearby balconies, and the excitement was palpable as 2,100 people began what they all hoped would be the trip of a lifetime. The first 2 days of their honeymoon were everything Liam and Clare had dreamed they would be. The couple threw themselves into the cruise experience with the enthusiasm of two people who had saved for months to afford this trip and were determined to make every moment count. Video footage recovered later would show them during these blissful first days looking like the epitome of honeymoon happiness. Claire's camcorder captured dozens of precious moments, the pair lounging by the main pool on Deck 9, their skin glistening with sunscreen as they read paperback novels and sipped frozen drinks with tiny umbrellas. The camera shook slightly as Clare giggled while filming Liam attempting to do a cannonball into the deep end, his normally composed demeanor dissolving into boyish playfulness. They spent hours at the midship bar, an elegant space with dark wood paneling and soft jazz music, sharing elaborate cocktails and talking about their future together. The bartender, a friendly man named Carlos from the Philippines, would later tell investigators that the young couple had been his favorite customers. "They were so in love," he said during questioning, "always holding hands, always smiling. The lady, she would draw pictures on napkins while they talked. Beautiful pictures of the ocean, of her husband's face. They tipped well and always said please and thank you." One of their favorite activities was the nightly entertainment in the ship's main theater. The evening of June 22nd had been 70s-themed dance night, and Clare had convinced Liam to participate despite his protests that he had 2 left feet. The ship's photographer captured them on the dance floor, Clare in a flowing yellow dress, with her hair loose around her shoulders, Liam in a brown suit that he'd borrowed from another passenger. They weren't the best dancers on the floor, but they were undoubtedly the happiest. Claire's sketchpad from those first days revealed a woman completely enchanted by her surroundings. She had drawn the ship's ornate dining room during their formal dinner on the second night, capturing the crystal chandeliers and elegant table settings with remarkable detail. Another sketch showed the view from their balcony at sunset, with careful shading that conveyed the way the light danced on the water. But most of her drawings were of Liam, reading in a deck chair, looking out at the ocean, sleeping peacefully in their cabin with the morning light streaming across his face. According to the ship's itinerary after leaving Galveston, the SS Meridian was headed toward the Cayman Islands, with 36 hours of open waters scheduled before their first port stop. This meant that for a day and a half, the ship would be completely alone in the vast expanse of the Gulf of Mexico, with nothing but ocean in every direction. For most passengers, this was part of the magic, the feeling of being disconnected from the everyday world, floating in a bubble of luxury and relaxation. The ship's activities director had planned special Sea Day events to keep everyone entertained: poolside games, cooking demonstrations, wine tastings, and live music performances. Liam had been particularly excited about the astronomy program, scheduled for the second night. As an engineer, he was fascinated by navigation and the way sailors had used the stars to find their way across the oceans for thousands of years. Clare, ever the supportive wife, had agreed to stay up late to attend the stargazing session on the upper observation deck, even though she was usually in bed by 10 p.m. The evening of June 23, 1995, would later be reconstructed minute by minute through witness statements, security footage, and physical evidence. It began like any other night aboard the SS Meridian, with passengers enjoying dinner, shows, and late-night socializing. For Liam and Clare Monroe, it would be their last night together. After dinner in the main dining room, where they had shared lobster thermidor and champagne, according to their waiter, the couple decided to attend the evening's entertainment in the Stardust Lounge. The featured performer was Marcus Thompson, a jazz pianist from New Orleans who specialized in romantic ballads from the 1940s and 50s. The lounge was dimly lit, with small, round tables arranged around a central stage where Thompson played a Black Baby grand piano. Several passengers would later remember seeing the Newlyweds during the performance. They sat at a table near the back, Clare leaning against Liam's shoulder as they listened to classics like The way you look tonight. And at last. The couple seemed completely absorbed in the music and in each other, occasionally whispering and sharing quiet laughs. Shannon Meyer, a 34-year-old teacher from Michigan who was traveling with her sister, had been seated at the table next to the Monroes. In her statement to investigators, she described the couple as absolutely glowing with happiness. She particularly remembered Claire's outfit that evening, a flowy blue sundress with tiny white flowers printed on it, white sandals with small heels, and a delicate silver bracelet that caught the light when she moved her hands. Liam wore khaki shorts, a navy button-down shirt, and leather boat shoes. They looked like they had stepped out of a magazine, Meyer told investigators. You know how some couples just look perfect together? That was them. They were holding hands on the table, and I remember thinking that I hoped to find love like that someday. The jazz performance ended at approximately 11 p.m., and passengers began filing out of the lounge to continue their evening elsewhere or return to their cabins. Shannon Meyer specifically remembered seeing Liam and Clare exit together, arms linked, moving slowly as if they were reluctant for the evening to end. They were the last ones to leave, she recalled. They were laughing about something. I couldn't hear what. And they headed toward the elevator bank that goes to the upper decks. The lady was carrying a small purse, and the man had a camera around his neck. Security footage from the elevator area, time-stamped at 11:17 p.m., shows the couple entering elevator number 3, which serviced decks 10 through 12. Liam can be seen, pressing the button for deck 12, the ship's highest passenger level, which housed the observation deck and several quiet seating areas popular with couples seeking privacy. The observation deck was one of the SS Meridian's most romantic spots, especially at night. Located at the very front of the ship, it offered an unobstructed 270-degree view of the ocean. During the day, it was often crowded with passengers taking photographs and enjoying the sea breeze. But after 11 p.m., it was usually deserted, except for the occasional couple seeking a quiet place to watch the stars. The deck was equipped with several bench seats, decorative lighting that was kept dim to preserve night vision, and safety railings that stood 42 inches high, standard for cruise ships at the time. The railing was topped with a smooth metal handrail, and the gaps between the vertical posts were designed to prevent accidental falls while still allowing passengers to enjoy unobstructed views. What happened next would remain a mystery for more than 2 decades. The SS Meridian's daily routine was as precise as clockwork. Every morning at 7 a.m., cabin stewards began their rounds, delivering coffee and pastries to passengers who had requested room service. When steward Miguel Rodriguez knocked on the door of cabin B742 on the morning of June 24th, he expected to find the young honeymoon couple sleeping peacefully after their late night. Instead, he found an empty cabin that looked as though it hadn't been occupied all night. The beds were still, made from the previous day's housekeeping service. Claire's nightgown was laid out on the chair where she had left it before going to dinner. Liam's toiletries were arranged neatly on the bathroom counter. Their formal clothes from dinner were hanging in the closet, but the casual outfits they had worn to the jazz performance were nowhere to be found. Rodriguez, who had worked on cruise ships for 8 years, immediately knew something was wrong. In his experience, even the most social passengers returned to their cabins eventually, if only to change clothes or rest for a few hours. He checked the balcony, thinking perhaps the couple had fallen asleep outside, but found only 2 empty deck chairs and a room service menu that had blown against the railing. Following protocol, Rodriguez reported the situation to his supervisor, who contacted the ship's security office. Within an hour, a full search of the SS Meridian was underway. Every public area was checked: restaurants, bars, lounges, the spa, the library, the casino, the theater, and all 11 passenger decks. The crew searched crew-only areas as well, thinking perhaps the couple had become lost or confused in the ship's maze-like interior. As the search expanded, a disturbing pattern emerged. No one had seen Liam and Clare Monroe since Shannon Meyer. spotted them leaving the Stardust Lounge at 11:15 p.m. the previous night. The couple seemed to have simply vanished into thin air. The ship's captain, a veteran sailor named Robert Harrison, made the difficult decision to contact the U.S. Coast Guard. At 2:30 p.m. on June 24th, while the SS Meridian was still 200 miles from the Cayman Islands, Harrison sent out a distress call reporting 2 missing passengers and requesting immediate assistance. What followed was one of the largest search and rescue operations in Gulf of Mexico history. Coast Guard cutters, helicopters, and fixed-wing aircraft converged on the area where the ship had been traveling during the night of June 23rd and early morning of June 24th. The search covered more than 1,000 square miles of open ocean, with crews looking for any sign of the missing couple. The ocean yielded nothing. No bodies, no debris, no personal belongings. It was as if Liam and Clare Monroe had never existed. Meanwhile, investigators aboard the ship began the painstaking process of interviewing passengers and crew members. The ship's security team, led by Chief Security Officer Patricia Williams, had dealt with missing passengers before, usually drunk individuals who had fallen asleep in unusual places, but never a case where 2 people had simultaneously disappeared without any witnesses. The ship's security systems, while adequate for 1995, were primitive by later standards. Only 6 fixed cameras existed on the entire vessel, and they covered only the main public areas: the casino, the main dining room, 2 elevator banks, the purser's desk, and the gangway. Critically, there were no cameras on the observation deck, the upper decks where couples often went for privacy, or any of the exterior deck spaces where someone might accidentally fall overboard. The cabin's digital keycard system provided one crucial piece of information. The door had not been accessed after 10:03 p.m. on June 23rd. This meant that either the couple had never returned to their room after leaving for dinner, or they had left again before 10:03 p.m., which contradicted the timeline established by witnesses who saw them at the jazz performance until 11 p.m. By June 28th, when the SS Meridian returned to Galveston, the Monroe disappearance had become a national news story. The combination of a honeymoon couple, a luxury cruise, and a complete mystery proved irresistible to media outlets across the country. Television news trucks lined the port, and reporters shouted questions at returning passengers as they disembarked. Headlines screamed from newspaper stands and television screens: "Newlyweds vanish at sea. Cruise turns into nightmare. Mystery on the Meridian. Couple missing without a trace." The story had all the elements that captivated the American public: young love, luxury, danger, and an unsolved puzzle that seemed impossible to crack. The case was assigned to Special Agent Ronald Kessler of the Coast Guard Investigative Service, CGIS, a specialized unit that handled crimes occurring in maritime jurisdictions. Kessler, a 20-year veteran of maritime law enforcement, had investigated everything from drug smuggling to maritime insurance fraud, but the Monroe case would prove to be the most challenging of his career. Over the next 3 weeks, Kessler and his team conducted what would become one of the most thorough missing persons investigations of the 1990s. They interviewed 63 passengers and 24 crew members, creating a detailed timeline of the ship's activities and the couple's movements. They examined the ship from top to bottom, looking for any physical evidence that might explain what had happened. Despite their exhaustive efforts, no one had witnessed anything unusual on the night of June 23rd. No one had heard screams, arguments, or the sound of someone falling into the water. No one had seen anything suspicious on the upper decks or observation areas. It was as if the couple had simply walked to the edge of the ship and vanished into the night. The families of Liam and Clare Monroe arrived in Texas within 48 hours of the ship's return, desperate for answers about their children's fate. The Monroes flew in from Colorado, while the Williams family came from Illinois. Both families were devastated, but they were also determined to find out what had happened to their children. A makeshift press conference was held outside Terminal 2. where just a week earlier, Liam and Clare had boarded the ship full of hopes and dreams. Clare's mother, Evelyn Williams, clutched a framed wedding photo showing her daughter in a white gown and Liam in a black tuxedo, both beaming with happiness. "My daughter is not the kind of person who would just disappear," Evelyn said, her voice breaking with emotion. "She's responsible, she's careful, and she was deeply in love with her husband. Something happened to them out there. Someone knows something, and we're not going to stop until we find out what it was." Liam's father, David Monroe, a retired air traffic controller, approached the mystery with the methodical thinking that had served him in his career. He had brought copies of every letter and postcard his son had ever sent, looking for any clue that might explain what had happened. "My son is an engineer," he told reporters. "He plans everything down to the last detail. He would never take unnecessary risks, especially with his new wife's safety at stake." The investigation took on new urgency as the families hired their own private investigators and offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the discovery of what had happened to Liam and Clare. Tips poured in from around the country, but none provided any useful leads. As the investigation continued, Agent Kessler and his team meticulously examined every piece of physical evidence from the couple's cabin. Each item was cataloged, photographed, and analyzed for any clue that might shed light on their disappearance. Clare's sketchbook provided a poignant glimpse into her final days. The pages were filled with drawings of the ship, the ocean, and her husband, each one showing her growing comfort and happiness with their surroundings. But it was the final, half-finished drawing that caught investigators' attention. Labeled "Midnight on the Sea" in Clare's careful handwriting, it showed the view from what appeared to be the ship's observation deck, with stars reflected in dark water. The drawing was incomplete, as if Clare had been interrupted while working on it. Her pencil lines showed the ship's railing in the foreground, the vast expanse of ocean beyond, and the beginning of what looked like a figure standing at the rail. But the figure was just an outline. She had never finished drawing whoever was standing there. Even more intriguing was the final entry in Clare's travel journal, written in her distinctive purple ink. "The stars look like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Liam says this is the best night of the trip so far. I can't imagine being anywhere else in the world, with anyone else. The ocean makes me feel so small, but so connected to everything at the same time. I think I could watch these waves forever." The entry was dated June 23rd, but there was no timestamp. It could have been written any time during their final day, from morning until the moment they disappeared. The cabin's digital keycard system provided another piece of the puzzle. The sophisticated system, new for 1995, tracked every time the door was opened and closed. The data showed that the cabin had been accessed at 6:45 p.m. on June 23rd, presumably when the couple returned from their day's activities to prepare for dinner. The door was opened again at 7:30 p.m. when they left for dinner, and one final time at 10:03 p.m. This final entry troubled investigators. If the couple had been at the jazz performance from 9:30 p.m. until 11 p.m., how could their cabin have been accessed at 10:03 p.m.? There were several possibilities. The timestamp could be wrong, someone else could have accessed their cabin, or one of them could have returned briefly while the other remained at the performance. The most significant physical evidence was discovered on the cabin's balcony. Crime scene technicians found a single fingerprint on the outside railing, pressed into the metal as if someone had gripped it tightly. The print was sent to the FBI's forensic laboratory for analysis, but it would be months before they received results. Meanwhile, the search of the ocean continued. Coast Guard vessels traced and retraced the SS Meridian's path, using sonar equipment to scan the ocean floor for any signs of the missing couple. The water in that area of the Gulf was nearly 200 feet deep, and the strong currents could have carried bodies or debris hundreds of miles from where they originally entered the water. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, the Coast Guard was forced to call off the active rescue operation. The chances of finding Liam and Clare alive had dropped to essentially zero, and the likelihood of recovering their bodies was decreasing with each passing day. As 1995 turned into 1996 and then into the new millennium, the Monroe case gradually faded from public attention. Agent Kessler retired in 2003, passing the case files to younger investigators who periodically reviewed the evidence but found no new leads. The file was officially designated as a cold case in 2005, though it was never officially closed. The families never gave up hope. Clare's sister, Megan, established a website dedicated to keeping the case in the public eye, posting photographs, witness statements, and pleas for information. Every year on June 23rd, the families held a memorial service, hoping that someday they would have answers about what had happened to their loved ones. The cruise industry, meanwhile, had implemented new safety measures in response to the Monroe case and other similar incidents. By 2010, all major cruise ships were required to have motion sensors along the railings that would detect if someone went overboard, and security camera coverage had expanded to include virtually every public area of modern vessels. But for the Monroe and Williams families, these improvements came too late. They continued to live with the terrible uncertainty of not knowing whether their children had suffered an accident, taken their own lives, or been the victims of foul play. The case might have remained unsolved forever if not for a remarkable discovery on a remote beach in Georgia, more than 2 decades after Liam and Clare Monroe had vanished into the night. June 9, 2017, dawned clear and bright on St. Catherine Island, a pristine barrier island off the Georgia coast that served as a wildlife preserve and research station. The Atlantic wind carried the salt scent of the ocean as Dr. Helen Foster, a marine biologist from the University of Georgia, led her team of graduate students on their weekly turtle nesting survey. Dr. Foster had been conducting these surveys for 15 years, documenting the nesting habits of loggerhead sea turtles that came ashore each summer to lay their eggs in the island's protected dunes. It was meticulous work that required walking miles of coastline, carefully examining the sand for turtle tracks and nest sites. On this particular morning, the team was surveying the island's south shore, a stretch of beach rarely visited by tourists, due to its remote location and difficult access. The area was known for its pristine beauty and the way that ocean currents deposited unusual items that had traveled hundreds or even thousands of miles across the Atlantic. Graduate student Greg Callahan was the first to spot something unusual. Half buried in sand and tangled in a mass of dried kelp was a dark object that clearly didn't belong in the natural environment. As he got closer, he could see it was some kind of bag, weathered and partially torn, but still recognizably man-made. "Doctor Foster!" he called out. "You need to see this!" The object was a black, waterproof bag, the kind used by photographers and boaters to protect sensitive equipment from moisture. The bag was severely weathered, its fabric faded by years of sun and salt water, and its zipper was corroded but still intact. Marine growth clung to its surface, and it was clear that it had been in the ocean for a very long time. Dr. Foster, who had found everything from message bottles to pieces of shipwrecks during her years of beach surveys, immediately recognized that this discovery was different. The bag's condition suggested it had been traveling in ocean currents for years, possibly decades. More importantly, it appeared to contain something. Following proper archaeological protocol, Dr. Foster carefully excavated the bag from the sand and kelp, photographing its position and surroundings before moving it. Back at the research station, she and her team carefully opened the corroded zipper, not knowing that they were about to unlock one of the most enduring mysteries in American maritime history. Inside the bag was a collection of items that seemed to tell a story of interrupted happiness and sudden tragedy. An old Nikon camera, its metal body corroded but still recognizable, sat nestled in what had once been protective foam padding. Next to it was a cracked Polaroid photograph showing a young couple on what appeared to be a ship's deck, their faces barely visible through the damage caused by years in salt water. Most poignantly, there was a silver charm bracelet, tarnished, but intact, with small charms that included a tiny Eiffel Tower, a graduation cap, and a heart engraved with the initials L and C. Wrapped in what had once been plastic but was now a fragile, degraded film was a wedding photograph, folded 4 times to fit in the small space. But the most significant discovery was a roll of undeveloped 35mm film, sealed in a waterproof plastic tube that had somehow survived its long journey through the ocean. The tube was clearly marked with a date, June 1995. Dr. Foster, suspecting that the items might be connected to a long-forgotten case, contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation within 24 hours. By the end of the week, the bag and its contents were in the custody of GBI forensic specialists, who would spend months analyzing every item for clues about its origin and significance. The investigation that followed Dr. Foster's discovery would demonstrate how far forensic science had advanced since 1995. Techniques that had been experimental or non-existent during the original investigation were now standard tools in criminal investigations. The first breakthrough came from the camera itself. Despite its years in the ocean, the Nikon's serial number was still partially visible on the camera body. Using specialized photography and digital enhancement, GBI technicians were able to recover enough of the number to trace it through Nikon's archives. Company records showed that the camera had been purchased at a photography store in Colorado. Springs in May 1995, just weeks before Liam and Clare Monroe's wedding. The buyer, according to the store's records, was one Liam Monroe of Denver, Colorado. While investigators worked to trace the camera's ownership, forensic specialists began the delicate process of examining the other items in the bag. The charm bracelet yielded traces of DNA that, when compared to samples provided by Clare's family members, confirmed that it had belonged to Clare Monroe. Hair follicles found in an old brush that her sister Megan had kept were a perfect match. The wedding photograph, despite years of damage from salt water, was carefully restored using digital techniques. The image showed Liam and Clare on their wedding day, standing in front of a church in Colorado Springs, both beaming with the happiness of a couple starting their life together. But it was the roll of undeveloped film that held the most promise for solving the mystery. Using state-of-the-art photographic restoration techniques, FBI specialists carefully developed the film in a controlled environment, not knowing what secrets it might reveal. The first few frames showed typical vacation photographs. Liam and Clare on the ship's deck posing by the pool, enjoying dinner in the ship's dining room. But as the technicians progressed through the roll, the images became more intriguing. Several frames appeared to have been taken late at night, showing the ship's upper decks illuminated only by safety lighting. One frame showed Clare standing at what appeared to be the observation deck railing, her hair blowing in the wind as she looked out at the dark ocean. But it was the final frames on the roll that would prove to be the key to solving the 22-year-old mystery. These images, taken in low light and slightly blurred as if the photographer had been moving, showed what appeared to be an altercation on the ship's upper deck. The photographs were damaged and unclear, but digital enhancement revealed what looked like 3 figures on the deck. 2 appeared to be Liam and Clare based on their clothing and stature. The third figure was harder to identify, but appeared to be a man in what looked like a crew uniform. Most significantly, the final photograph on the roll showed what appeared to be someone going over the ship's railing. The image was blurry and indistinct, but it was clearly the last photograph taken on that roll of film. The implications were staggering. If these photographs were authentic, they suggested that Liam and Clare Monroe had not died in an accident or taken their own lives. They had been murdered. Armed with new evidence that suggested the Monroe case was actually a double homicide, investigators launched an international manhunt for suspects who might have been aboard the SS Meridian on that fateful night in June 1995. The investigation focused on crew members, as the figure in the photographs appeared to be wearing some type of uniform. Ship employment records from 1995 were meticulously reviewed, and investigators began the painstaking process of tracking down everyone who had worked aboard the SS Meridian during the Caribbean cruise. Many of the crew members were foreign nationals, who had worked on cruise ships for a few years before returning to their home countries. Some had died in the intervening decades. Others had moved multiple times and left no forwarding addresses. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former cruise ship security officer named James Patterson, who had worked in the industry for 30 years, contacted investigators after seeing news reports about the Monroe case. He remembered something that he thought might be significant. There was this crew member, Patterson told investigators. His name was Anton Marov, and he was trouble from day one. He was from Bulgaria, worked in the maintenance department. The guy had a mean streak, and there were always rumors about him bothering female passengers. Management should have fired him, but good maintenance workers were hard to find, so they kept giving him chances. Patterson's memory was that Marov had been fired from the SS Meridian sometime in late 1995 or early 1996, but he couldn't remember the exact circumstances. What he did remember was that Marov had always given him a bad feeling. He had these cold eyes, Patterson recalled, and he was always talking about how easy it would be to make someone disappear on a ship. He said the ocean was the perfect place to hide a crime because it washed away all the evidence. Using ship employment records and immigration databases, investigators began tracing Anton Marov's whereabouts. They discovered that he had indeed worked on the SS Meridian in 1995 in the maintenance department that gave him access to virtually every area of the ship, including the upper decks where passengers rarely ventured at night. After leaving the cruise line in early 1996, Marov had worked on various commercial vessels before eventually returning to Bulgaria. But tracking him down would prove to be more difficult than investigators initially expected. Through Interpol, they discovered that Anton Marov had been living under an assumed name in the Bulgarian port city of Varna, working at a shipyard and keeping a low profile. When Bulgarian police conducted surveillance of the man they believed to be Marov, they found someone who had clearly gone to great lengths to avoid detection. The man living under the name Nikolai Dragov had surgically altered his fingerprints, years earlier making identification through traditional means impossible. He had also changed his appearance significantly, growing a beard and gaining weight to alter his facial structure. But modern forensic techniques proved more difficult to evade than Marov had anticipated. In October 2017, Bulgarian police, working with Interpol agents and FBI investigators, conducted a coordinated raid on the Varna shipyard where the man calling himself Nikolai Dragov had been working. The operation was planned with military precision, as investigators feared that their suspect might flee if he realized he was being investigated. The man they arrested was 56 years old with graying hair, a scar across his left cheek, and eyes that matched the cold description that James Patterson had provided. Despite his altered appearance and surgically modified fingerprints, DNA analysis would later confirm that Nikolai Dragov was indeed Anton Marov, the former cruise ship maintenance worker who had disappeared after the Monroe case. During his initial arrest, Marov claimed to have no memory of the Monroes or the events of June 23, 1995. He insisted that he was an innocent shipyard worker who had never been involved in any criminal activity. His story was that he had changed his identity years earlier to escape gambling debts in Bulgaria, not to avoid prosecution for any crimes. But the evidence told a different story. Using advanced forensic techniques that hadn't existed in 1995, investigators were able to extract DNA evidence from items that had been recovered from the waterproof bag. Traces of skin cells found inside the camera bag, preserved by the salt water and anaerobic conditions, matched Anton Marov's genetic profile. Even more damning was evidence found on the roll of film itself. Salt-preserved skin flakes on the plastic, Film tube contained DNA that matched Liam Monroe, suggesting that he had handled the film container in his final moments, possibly trying to preserve evidence of what was happening to him and his wife. The story that emerged from the forensic evidence painted a horrific picture of the Monroes' final night. Based on the photographs and physical evidence, investigators theorized that Anton Marov had encountered the couple on the observation deck during the early morning hours of June 24, 1995. The couple had likely gone to the upper deck to enjoy the romantic setting and take photographs of the starlit ocean. Liam had been using his Nikon camera to capture images of Clare against the backdrop of the sea, creating memories of what should have been the perfect end to a perfect day. At some point, Marov had appeared on the deck. Whether this was a chance encounter or whether he had been stalking the couple through the ship's corridors remained unclear. What was certain, based on the photographic evidence, was that a confrontation had occurred. The final photographs on Liam's camera roll suggested that he had continued taking pictures even as the situation became dangerous, perhaps hoping to document whatever was happening for later evidence. The blurry, chaotic nature of these final images suggested that a struggle had taken place. An additional crucial piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Sasha Petrov, a former crew member who had worked as a kitchen assistant on the SS Meridian, came forward after seeing news reports of Marov's arrest. Petrov, now living in Canada, had been afraid to speak up for more than 20 years, but the arrest gave him the courage to tell what he knew. In a sworn statement provided to investigators, Petrov described seeing Marov lurking near the upper decks around midnight on June 23, 1995. At the time, Petrov had been taking a smoking break on a crew-only deck when he noticed Marov moving stealthily through areas where he had no business being during his off-duty hours. He was acting strange, Petrov recalled. He kept looking around like he was checking to see if anyone was watching him. When he saw me, he got angry and told me to mind my own business. I thought maybe he was stealing something from passenger areas, but I was too scared to report it. Marov had a reputation for violence, and us kitchen workers, we didn't want trouble. Even more chilling was Petrov's recollection of something Marov had said during a crew meal several days before the Monroes disappeared. He was talking about how easy it would be to make someone disappear on a ship, Petrov testified. He said, "The ocean forgives everything. It erases the mess." At the time, I thought he was just trying to sound tough. But after those people went missing, I always wondered. While investigators in Bulgaria and the United States worked to build their case against Anton Marov, an extraordinary development was taking place thousands of miles away that would provide the final piece of the puzzle. In suburban Atlanta, Georgia, 11-year-old Madison Foster, the daughter of Dr. Helen Foster, the marine biologist who had discovered the waterproof bag, was dealing with her own mystery. Madison had been experiencing what she described as weird dreams ever since her mother had brought home some of the items from the beach discovery. The young girl, who was fascinated by social media and had recently been allowed to join Instagram, had been having vivid nightmares about being on a ship at night. In her dreams, she could see a young couple in trouble, and she felt an overwhelming urge to help them somehow. Madison's dreams were so realistic and disturbing that she began sketching what she saw, trying to process the images that haunted her sleep. Her drawings showed remarkably detailed scenes of a cruise ship's deck at night, with figures that seemed to match the descriptions of Liam and Clare Monroe. But it was what Madison found on her phone that would shock investigators around the world. On the evening of November 15, 2017, Madison was scrolling through her Instagram feed when she noticed that her phone's camera roll contained videos she didn't remember taking. The files were dated from several weeks earlier, around the time her mother had brought home the items from the beach. The videos, each only a few seconds long, appeared to show scenes from a cruise ship at night. But these weren't videos that Madison had shot. They looked like they had been filmed in 1995, based on the quality and the clothing of the people in them. Confused and frightened, Madison showed the videos to her mother, who immediately recognized their potential significance. Dr. Foster contacted the FBI within hours, and by the next morning, federal digital forensics experts were examining Madison's phone. What they found defied explanation. Somehow, Madison's phone contained what appeared to be original video footage from the night Liam and Clare Monroe disappeared. The metadata on the files suggested they had been created in 1995, but they had somehow appeared on a device that hadn't been manufactured until 2015. The videos showed Anton Marov confronting the young couple on the observation deck. The footage was grainy and shot from an unusual angle, as if the camera had been hidden or dropped. But it clearly showed Marov attacking Liam Monroe, who fought desperately to protect his wife. The final video in the sequence showed Clare Monroe being forced over the ship's railing, her terrified face visible in the moonlight as she fell toward the dark water below. Liam's anguished scream could be heard clearly on the audio track as he lunged toward Marov, only to be pushed overboard, himself seconds later. The discovery of the videos on Madison Foster's phone created a sensation that extended far beyond the Monroe murder case. Digital forensics experts from the FBI, the NSA, and private technology companies were brought in to analyze how 1995 video footage could have appeared on a modern smartphone. The technical analysis revealed something that seemed to challenge everything experts thought they knew about digital technology. The video files contained metadata that was consistent with 1995 technology, but they had somehow been transferred to Madison's phone without any physical connection or wireless transmission that could be detected. Dr. Sarah Chen, a leading expert in digital forensics from MIT, spent weeks analyzing the files. From a purely technical standpoint, what we're seeing here should be impossible, she told investigators. These files show all the characteristics of having been created on analog video equipment from the 1990s, but they've somehow appeared on a modern digital device with no explanation for how the transfer occurred. Some investigators theorized that the videos might have been recovered from Liam Monroe's camcorder, which had never been found. Perhaps the device had been damaged in the attack, but had somehow continued recording, creating a digital ghost of the terrible events. Others suggested that the emotional trauma associated with the items in the waterproof bag might have created some kind of psychic imprint that Madison's sensitive young mind had picked up on, translating into digital images through mechanisms that science couldn't yet explain. Regardless of how the videos had appeared on Madison's phone, their evidentiary value was undeniable. The footage clearly showed Anton Marov committing murder, and it provided prosecutors with the smoking gun they needed to pursue a conviction. The videos were subjected to every possible authentication test. Voice analysis confirmed that the screams belonged to Liam Monroe based on comparison with home videos provided by his family. Facial recognition software confirmed the identities of all three people in the footage. Even the ship's distinctive architectural details visible in the background matched the SS Meridian's observation deck exactly. In May 2018, Anton Marov was extradited to the United States to face federal charges for the murders of Liam and Clare Monroe. The case had become one of the most closely watched trials of the decade, not only because of the long delay in bringing the perpetrator to justice, but because of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the discovery of evidence. Federal prosecutors, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, pursued what's known as a no-body homicide, a rare but increasingly accepted legal approach in cases where victims' remains are never recovered. The prosecution's case relied on the combination of physical evidence, forensic analysis, witness testimony, and the inexplicable video footage found on Madison Foster's phone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh said in her opening statement, "this case asks you to consider evidence that challenges our understanding of how justice can be served. But at its heart, this is a simple story about a predator who saw an opportunity to commit murder and thought he could get away with it because the ocean would hide his crimes forever." The prosecution methodically presented their evidence over the course of 3 weeks. Expert witnesses testified about the DNA evidence linking Marov to the waterproof bag and its contents. Marine biologists explained how ocean currents could have carried the bag from the Gulf of Mexico to the Georgia coast over the course of 22 years. The most dramatic moment in the trial came when prosecutors played the videos from Madison, Foster's phone, for the jury. The courtroom was absolutely silent as the grainy footage showed the final moments of Liam and Clare Monroe's lives. Several jury members were visibly shaken, and Clare's mother had to leave the courtroom during the most disturbing segments. Madison Foster herself testified about finding the videos on her phone, describing her nightmares and her inexplicable connection to the case. Her testimony was carefully limited to factual observations, as prosecutors wanted to avoid any appearance of relying on supernatural explanations for the evidence. Marov's defense team, led by experienced criminal attorney Robert Harrison, faced an almost impossible task. The physical evidence was overwhelming, the witness testimony was consistent, and the video footage was devastating to their client's case. Their strategy focused on attacking the chain of custody for the evidence and questioning the authenticity of the videos. How can we trust evidence that supposedly appeared on a child's phone through unknown means? Harrison argued. This case asks you to convict a man based on what amounts to a ghost story. But the defense team's efforts were undermined by their client's behavior during the trial. Marov refused to testify on his own behalf, and his demeanor in the courtroom was cold and unrepentant. When prosecutors presented evidence of his surgically altered fingerprints and false identity, it became clear that this was a man who had been running from justice for more than 2 decades. The defense argued lack of clear motive, suggesting that the prosecution had failed to explain why Marov would have targeted the Monroe couple specifically. They pointed out that there was no evidence of robbery, sexual assault, or any other traditional motive for murder, but prosecutors countered with testimony from former crew members who described Marov's history of inappropriate behavior toward female passengers and his violent tendencies. They suggested that Marov had encountered the couple during their romantic evening on the observation deck and had attempted to assault Clare, leading to a confrontation that ended in double murder. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. A verdict that brought an end to one of the longest-running maritime murder cases in American history. On all counts, 2 counts of first-degree murder, interstate transport of human remains, and obstruction of justice, the verdict was the same: guilty. The reading of the verdict was an emotional moment for everyone in the courtroom. The Monroe and Williams families, who had waited more than 23 years for justice, wept openly as each guilty verdict was announced. Clare's sister Megan later said it was the first time she had felt any sense of peace since 1995. "We always knew in our hearts that Liam and Clare didn't just disappear," she told reporters outside the courthouse. "They were murdered by a monster who thought he could get away with it forever." Today, justice was finally served, not just for our family, but for every family who has lost someone to violence and been left without answers. Judge Patricia Williams, who had presided over the trial, sentenced Anton Marov to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In delivering the sentence, she addressed the defendant directly. "Mr. Marov, your crimes were not just against Liam and Clare Monroe, but against their families who have suffered for more than 2 decades without knowing what happened to their loved ones. Your actions robbed the world of 2 young people who had their whole lives ahead of them, and you have shown no remorse for the devastation you caused." Marov, who had remained silent throughout the trial, finally spoke as he was being led from the courtroom. "The ocean keeps its secrets," he said in heavily accented English. "But sometimes the dead don't rest easy." His words sent chills through everyone present and seemed to acknowledge not only his guilt, but the extraordinary circumstances that had led to his conviction. On June 21, 2020, exactly 25 years after Liam and Clare Monroe had boarded the SS Meridian for what should have been the honeymoon of their dreams, their families gathered for a memorial service that would finally provide the closure they had sought for so long. The SS Meridian itself had been retired from cruise service in 2010 and converted into a floating museum exhibit docked permanently in Galveston. The ship's observation deck, where the young couple had spent their final moments, had been transformed into a memorial garden, with plaques honoring all passengers who had lost their lives aboard cruise ships over the decades. The centerpiece of the memorial was a bronze plaque dedicated specifically to Liam and Clare Monroe. The inscription read, "In loving memory of Liam Michael Monroe and Clare Elizabeth Monroe, whose love story was cut short, but whose memory will live forever in the hearts of those who knew them. Their courage in the face of evil helped bring their killer to justice, and may their spirits finally rest in peace." The memorial service was attended by more than 200 people, including family members, friends, investigators who had worked on the case, and even some of the passengers who had been aboard the ship during that fateful cruise in 1995. Shannon Meyer, the teacher who had been the last person to see the couple alive, traveled from Michigan to pay her respects. Dr. Helen Foster and her daughter Madison were special guests at the ceremony. Madison, now 14 years old, had become something of a reluctant celebrity due to her role in solving the case. She spoke briefly at the service, reading a poem she had written about the importance of never giving up hope, even in the darkest circumstances. "Liam and Clare's story taught me that love is stronger than death," Madison said, her voice carrying clearly across the deck where the young couple had died. Their love for each other and their family's love for them made sure that the truth finally came out. Justice was delayed, but it was not denied. The service concluded with the families scattering white roses into the Gulf of Mexico, symbolically returning Liam and Clare to the sea that had hidden their story for so many years. As the flowers floated away on the tide, there was a sense among those present that the couple's spirits had finally found peace. The Monroe case had far-reaching implications that extended well beyond the conviction of Anton Marov. The investigation led to significant improvements in cruise ship security protocols, including mandatory background checks for all crew members and expanded camera coverage of passenger areas. The case also highlighted the importance of never giving up on cold cases, no matter how much time has passed. Advanced forensic techniques that didn't exist in 1995 were able to solve a case that had seemed hopeless for more than 2 decades. Most remarkably, the case demonstrated that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected sources. Without the chance discovery by Dr. Foster's research team, the courage of witnesses who finally came forward, and the inexplicable appearance of video evidence on Madison Foster's phone, Anton Marov might never have been brought to justice. The Monroe family established a foundation in Liam and Clare's memory, dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and funding research into maritime safety. The foundation's motto, taken from Clare's final journal entry, reads, "The stars look like home," a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, hope can guide us toward the truth. Today, more than 28 years after Liam and Clare, Monroe boarded the SS Meridian for their honeymoon cruise. Their story serves as both a tragedy and a testament to the power of love, family, and determination in the pursuit of justice. Their deaths were not in vain if they help prevent similar tragedies, and remind us all that every life has value, and every victim deserves justice, no matter how long it takes to achieve it. The case files have been sealed. Anton Marov remains in federal prison, where he will spend the rest of his life, and the SS Meridian continues to serve as a floating memorial to all those who have lost their lives at sea. But perhaps most importantly, Liam and Clare Monroe's love story, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire others to never give up hope and to always fight for truth and justice.